My husband accused me of favoring my children over his daughter. So I arranged a family meeting. I'm Talia, 35 years old, with two amazing kids, Lily, who's 14, and Max, who's 10. 3 years ago, I married Daniel, thinking we'd create the perfect blended family with his 16-year-old daughter, Sophie. We were so happy at first, full of hope and dreams for our future together. But everything changed when Daniel started accusing me of favoring my biological children over Sophie. I never expected our family would unravel so quickly. Before I tell you how this whole nightmare started, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever navigated the complicated waters of blended families. 5 years ago, my first marriage ended after a decade together. The divorce was amicable enough, but suddenly I found myself a single mom raising two children on my own. Lily was 9 then, and Max was only 5. They were so young, so vulnerable, and I promised myself that their happiness and well-being would always be my priority. I met Daniel at a parent-teacher conference at Westridge Elementary. Both Lily and Sophie attended the same school, though they were in different grades. I was running late that evening, rushing down the hallway with my messy bun threatening to collapse entirely, when I literally bumped into him outside the science classroom. "Whoa there," he said, steadying me with a gentle hand. "Let me guess. Ms. Kaplan's conference." I nodded, catching my breath. "She always runs over time. Tell me about it." Daniel smiled, and something about that smile made my heart skip. "I've been waiting for 15 minutes already." We ended up chatting while waiting for our respective meetings and discovered we were both single parents. There was something so reassuring about Daniel's calm presence. He spoke about Sophie with such love and pride, telling me how she excelled in mathematics and played violin in the school orchestra. I found myself sharing stories about Lily's passion for painting and Max's obsession with dinosaurs. After our conferences concluded, Daniel suggested grabbing coffee sometime. I hesitated at first. Dating as a single mom wasn't something I took lightly. My children had already been through one family restructuring, and I was cautious about introducing anyone new into their lives. But there was something about Daniel that felt right. Our relationship developed slowly, thoughtfully. For the first 2 months, we only met for lunch dates while our kids were at school. We talked about everything under the sun: our jobs, our dreams, our parenting philosophies. Daniel was a software engineer who worked remotely 3 days a week so he could be more present for Sophie. I admired his dedication to fatherhood. When we finally decided it was time for our children to meet, we arranged a casual picnic at the park. I was a bundle of nerves that morning, fussing over the homemade sandwiches and reminding Lily and Max to be on their best behavior. "What if they don't like us?" Max had asked, his little face scrunched with worry. "They'll love you," I assured him, though my own stomach was doing somersaults. Sophie arrived at the park clutching her father's hand. She was tall for her age, with long dark hair and Daniel's hazel eyes. She seemed sweet but quiet, offering a shy hello before retreating behind her father. I didn't push her to interact, understanding her reservation. Blending families wasn't supposed to happen overnight. Over the next several months, we spent more time together as a group. Movie nights, board game tournaments, weekend hikes. Sophie slowly began to open up, particularly with Max, who adored her immediately. She was more reserved with Lily, perhaps because they were closer in age. After a year of dating, Daniel proposed during a sunset beach walk while our children built sandcastles nearby. When I said yes, all 3 kids cheered and ran over to hug us. It felt perfect, like we were already a family. The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family in Daniel's backyard. Sophie was a junior bridesmaid, and she seemed genuinely happy that day, twirling in her lavender dress and helping Lily adjust her flower crown. Moving in together brought the first real challenges. We bought a new house with enough bedrooms for everyone wanting a fresh start that wouldn't favor either original family. But the territorial disputes began almost immediately. Sophie complained about sharing a bathroom with Lily. Lily was upset that Sophie's room was slightly larger. Max cried because his new bedroom didn't get the morning sun like his old one. That's when I noticed the first signs of Sophie's resentment. Small incidents that could be dismissed as normal sibling friction, but there was something calculated about them. She would accidentally use Lily's special face wash. She would forget to tell Max when his friends called. She would misunderstand when I asked her to save some cookies for the others. When I mentioned these incidents to Daniel, he would smile indulgently and say, "They're just adjusting towel. Rome wasn't built in a day." I wanted so badly to believe him. I redoubled my efforts to bond with Sophie, taking her shopping for clothes without the other kids teaching her my grandmother's secret cookie recipe, asking about her day every afternoon when she came home from school. Sometimes she would respond positively, and I would feel a flutter of hope. But often her answers were monosyllabic, her eyes cold. Meanwhile, Sophie's coldness toward Lily and Max intensified. She would criticize Lily's appearance, making cutting remarks about her clothes or her hair just subtle enough that I questioned whether I was overreacting. She would accidentally step on Max's Lego creations, then act exasperated when he cried. The first major incident happened 6 months after we moved in together. Lily had spent weeks working on her science fair project, an elaborate model of the solar system with hand-painted planets and meticulously calculated orbits. The night before the fair, we all went out for dinner to celebrate Daniel's promotion. Sophie claimed she wasn't feeling well and stayed home. When we returned, Lily's project was in ruins. The planets were crushed, the display board soaked with water. Sophie was conveniently in the shower when we discovered the damage, but later claimed she had tripped while carrying a glass of water past the project. Lily was devastated, sobbing uncontrollably as we tried to salvage what we could. I stayed up all night helping her recreate a simpler version, but the joy had been stolen from her accomplishment. When I confronted Daniel about the incident, suggesting it might not have been an accident, we had our first serious argument. "Are you seriously accusing my daughter of sabotage?" he demanded, his voice rising. "It was an accident, Talia. Kids are clumsy. You need to stop looking for problems where there aren't any." I backed down, telling myself that maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe blending our families would take more time than I had anticipated. Maybe Sophie just needed more reassurance that she wasn't being replaced. But as I watched her smirk slightly while Lily presented her hastily reassembled project at the fair the next day, a chill ran down my spine. Something wasn't right, and a growing uneasiness settled in my stomach. Still, I was determined to make our family work. I just had no idea how much worse things would get. A year into our marriage, what had started as occasional incidents had developed into a disturbing pattern. Sophie had perfected a Jekyll and Hyde routine that would have impressed Broadway directors. When Daniel was present, she was the perfect daughter, helpful and sweet, offering to set the table or help Max with his homework. The moment her father left the room, a cold mask would slip over her features. The worst part was how calculating she had become. She never left evidence, never acted out when anyone else could witness it. It was psychological warfare waged with precision against two children who were too confused and intimidated to effectively defend themselves. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home early from work with a migraine. The house was quiet, and I assumed no one was home yet. But as I passed Sophie's room, I heard voices. Peering through the partially open door, I saw Sophie holding Max's prized dinosaur collection, the special one his father had given him before moving to another state. "Please give them back," Max was whispering, tears streaming down his face. "They're just stupid toys," Sophie replied, dangling a velociraptor over her trash can. "Maybe if you stop being such a baby all the time, I'll think about it." I pushed the door open, and Sophie's expression transformed instantly into innocent surprise. "Oh, Talia, Max was upset about something at school, and I was just trying to cheer him up with his dinosaurs," she said sweetly, handing the toys back to Max. "Weren't we, buddy?" Max's eyes met mine, wide and frightened. He nodded mutely, clutching his dinosaurs to his chest before scurrying from the room. That wasn't an isolated incident. I discovered Sophie had been reading Lily's diary, sharing embarrassing secrets with girls at school. Lily, who had once been confident and outgoing, became withdrawn and anxious. She started asking to stay home from school, claiming stomach aches that mysteriously appeared on Monday mornings and disappeared by Saturday. Max, my fearless little adventurer, became jumpy and nervous, especially when left alone with Sophie. He started following me around the house, volunteering to help with chores he'd previously avoided just to stay within my sight. When I tried to address the situation privately with Sophie, she listened with wide, innocent eyes. "I would never hurt Lily or Max," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "I love them like my own brother and sister. I'm trying so hard to be part of this family." But the moment Daniel came home and I tried to discuss what had happened, Sophie's eyes would fill with tears, and she would claim I was singling her out unfairly. "Dad," she would sob, "Talia always assumes the worst of me. Nothing I do is ever good enough." And Daniel, to my increasing frustration, would immediately come to her defense. "You need to cut her some slack, Tal," he'd say later when we were alone. "She lost her mother to addiction, she's had to adjust to a whole new family, and now she feels like you're constantly criticizing her." It was true that Sophie's mother Amanda had struggled with substance abuse and eventually relinquished primary custody to Daniel. I had always been sympathetic to the trauma Sophie must have experienced, but that sympathy was being tested daily by her deliberate cruelty toward my children. I sought advice from friends who had successfully blended families, joining an online support group, even reading parenting books specifically about step relationships. I tried so many approaches: family movie nights, one-on-one, outings with each child, creating new traditions unique to our blended family. Nothing seemed to penetrate Sophie's determination to undermine the family unit. Things came to a head when Lily's tablet was found smashed on the bathroom floor. Sophie claimed she'd heard a crash while doing homework but hadn't investigated. The tablet had been a gift from Lily's grandparents for her birthday just 2 weeks earlier. After reviewing our security camera footage from the hallway, I could clearly see Sophie entering the bathroom with the tablet in hand, though the bathroom itself wasn't visible from the camera angle. When confronted with this evidence, Sophie confessed to accidentally dropping it, but insisted she had been trying to move it to a safer location. I grounded Sophie for a week, taking away her phone privileges and restricting her to the house except for school. That evening, when Daniel came home, Sophie launched into a tearful tirade about how I was treating her unfairly. "If it had been Lily who broke something, you would have just said accidents happen," she cried. "But because it's me, I'm punished. You've always favored them over me." Daniel turned to me, his expression hard. "Is that true? Did you even give her a chance to explain?" "Of course I did," I replied, stunned by the accusation. "Daniel, she deliberately took Lily's tablet into the bathroom and broke it. The security camera shows her taking it." "So you're spying on her now?" Daniel's voice raised. No wonder she feels unwelcome in her own home. That was the first time he openly accused me of favoritism, and it cut deep. I wasn't perfect, but I had tried so hard to treat all 3 children fairly. Had I somehow failed without realizing it? Was I unconsciously favoring my biological children? I suggested family counseling, hoping a professional could help us navigate these troubled waters. Daniel reluctantly agreed, but Sophie masterfully sabotaged the sessions. She would appear completely open and cooperative in the therapist's office, agreeing to behavior contracts and family rules. But at home, nothing changed except her tactics became more sophisticated. The division between Daniel and me grew. We stopped discussing the children altogether because it inevitably led to arguments. I felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a home where I was walking on eggshells, trying to protect my children while preserving my marriage. Something had to give, but I never imagined how dramatic the breaking point would be. The signs were becoming impossible to ignore. Lily, once a straight A student with a close circle of friends, was now barely maintaining C's. She stopped inviting friends over, claiming she just didn't feel like it. Her beautiful artwork, once proudly displayed on our refrigerator, disappeared. When I asked about it, she shrugged and mumbled something about not being very good anyway. Max, who had always slept soundly through the night since he was a toddler, began having nightmares. Worse, he started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 4. When I gently asked what his bad dreams were about, he would clam up, shaking his head vigorously. One afternoon, while sorting laundry, I noticed bruises on Max's upper arm, small fingerprint-sized marks that looked like someone had grabbed him roughly. When I asked him about them, his eyes darted nervously toward Sophie's bedroom before he stammered out a story about falling during recess. That night, after tucking him in, I sat on the edge of his bed and held his small hand in mine. "Max, sweetheart," I said gently, "you know you can tell me anything, right? No matter what. I will always believe you, and I will always protect you." His lower lip trembled and tears filled his eyes. "You can't tell anyone," he whispered. "She said no one would believe me anyway." My heart clenched. "Who, baby? Who said that?" "Sophie," he whispered so quietly I had to lean in to hear him. "She pinches me when no one's looking. She tells me I'm stupid and that you and Daddy will send me away because I'm annoying. She said if I tell, she'll hurt Lily worse." I struggled to keep my expression calm as rage and horror battled inside me. "Has she hurt Lily too?" Max nodded miserably. "She pulls her hair in the upstairs bathroom where there's no camera. She steals her stuff and hides it. She told Lily's friends that Lily said mean things about them." I gathered Max into my arms, holding him tight as he finally released months of fear and tension sobbing against my shoulder. "I've got you," I promised. "No one is going to hurt you anymore." After Max finally fell asleep, I went to Lily's room. She was sitting at her desk, half-heartedly attempting homework. When I asked her directly about Sophie's behavior, the floodgates opened. For nearly an hour, Lily detailed months of systematic emotional abuse. Sophie had been sending her anonymous, threatening texts from fake numbers. She had spread rumors at school that Lily had an eating disorder. She had deliberately spilled bleach on Lily's favorite sweater, the last gift her grandmother had given her before passing away. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Lily looked down at her hands. "Sophie said Dad would always take her side. She said he'd make us move out if I complained. And honestly, Mom, she was right. He never believes anything bad about her." I was facing an impossible situation. On one hand, my children were being systematically traumatized in what should have been their safe space. On the other, my husband seemed incapable of seeing his daughter's behavior objectively. If I confronted him with what I'd learned, would he believe me, or would it just make things worse? That night, I tried anyway. After the children were asleep, I sat Daniel down and, as calmly as possible, shared what Max and Lily had told me. The conversation quickly spiraled into our worst fight ever. Daniel accused me of coaching my children to lie about his daughter. He claimed I had never given Sophie a fair chance, that I was trying to turn him against her because I was jealous of their close relationship. "She's a 16-year-old girl who lost her mother to drugs, for God's sake," he shouted. "Of course she has some adjustment issues, but this is character assassination, Talia. I never thought you'd stoop so low." "Why would I make this up?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why would Lily and Max lie about this?" "Kids exaggerate," Daniel said dismissively. "They're probably jealous of the attention I give Sophie. If you weren't constantly undermining my relationship with her, maybe she'd feel secure enough to bond with your kids." By the time our argument ended, nothing was resolved. Daniel retreated to the guest bedroom, and I lay awake all night, my mind racing. If Daniel wouldn't believe our children, how could I protect them? The next day, while everyone was at school or work, I installed a small nanny cam in the living room bookshelf. I hated the idea of secretly recording in our home, but I needed evidence that even Daniel couldn't dismiss. Over the next week, the footage captured Sophie's verbal abuse of Lily. The constant criticisms, the sly threats when adults weren't in earshot, the way she would deliberately provoke Lily and then act innocent when I entered the room. It was worse than I had imagined, systematic and calculated. I watched the footage alone in my home office, my hand pressed against my mouth in horror. This wasn't normal sibling rivalry or blended family adjustment. This was deliberate psychological abuse. I downloaded the videos to a secure folder, planning to show Daniel that weekend when we would have time to really talk it through. But before I could show him the evidence, events took a turn I could never have predicted. Friday afternoon, I returned from grocery shopping to find Lily locked in the upstairs bathroom. I could hear her sobbing through the door. "Lily, honey, open up," I called, setting down my bags in the hallway. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out together." After several minutes of gentle coaxing, the lock clicked and the door opened. I gasped when I saw my daughter's face. Her left cheek was bright red with the distinct outline of a handprint. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her lower lip was split. "She hit me," Lily whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "We were arguing about her using my makeup without asking, and she slapped me so hard, Mom." I guided Lily to sit on the edge of the bathtub, getting a cold washcloth for her face. "Where is Sophie now?" "In her room. Max is at Jason's house for a play date, remember?" I was simultaneously grateful that Max wasn't home and furious that things had escalated to physical violence. This wasn't something I could let slide or attempt to handle privately. Daniel needed to see the reality of the situation immediately. I texted him, "Emergency at home, need you here now." While waiting for Daniel, I documented Lily's injury with photos and had her write down exactly what happened while it was fresh in her memory. I then knocked on Sophie's door. "We need to talk about what happened with Lily," I said as calmly as I could. Sophie was sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. She looked up with perfectly feigned confusion. "What do you mean? Lily has a handprint on her face that matches the size of your hand. Her lip is bleeding." Sophie's expression transformed into one of outrage. "Are you accusing me of hitting her? She probably did it to herself. You know how dramatic she is, always seeking attention." The absolute denial in the face of clear evidence stunned me. "Sophie, there is no scenario where hitting is acceptable in this family. We're going to discuss this as a family when your father gets home." "Whatever," she muttered, returning to her phone. "Dad will never believe I would do something like that anyway." The certainty in her voice chilled me. Was she right? Would Daniel reflexively take her side despite physical evidence? 20 minutes later, Daniel burst through the front door, his face tight with worry. "What's the emergency? Is everyone okay?" I led him to the kitchen where Lily was sitting with an ice pack against her cheek. When she lowered it, revealing the reddened handprint, Daniel's eyes widened. "What happened?" he demanded. Before I could speak, Sophie appeared in the doorway, tears already streaming down her face. "Dad, they're trying to set me up. Lily and Talia hate me so much they're making up lies." Daniel looked between his daughter and my daughter, confusion evident in his expression. "Someone tell me what's going on, now." Lily began explaining, her voice small but determined, recounting how Sophie had taken her expensive foundation without permission, how they had argued, and how Sophie had suddenly slapped her across the face with full force. Halfway through Lily's account, Sophie burst into dramatic sobs. "That's not true. She attacked me first. She was screaming at me for using a tiny bit of her makeup, calling me names, and then she tried to grab me. I just pushed her away to defend myself." Daniel moved immediately to Sophie's side, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. "Is that what happened, Sophie? You were defending yourself." I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Despite the clear handprint on Lily's face, despite the fact that Lily had no history of violence while Sophie had a pattern of manipulation, Daniel was instinctively siding with his daughter. "Daniel," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Look at Lily's face. That is not a defensive push. That is a deliberate slap with significant force." "You weren't even here," Sophie cried. "You always assume the worst about me." The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control when Max walked in, having been dropped off early from his playdate. He took one look at the scene, his sister crying with an ice pack, Sophie sobbing dramatically in Daniel's arms, me standing rigidly by the counter, and his eyes went wide with alarm. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice small. "Nothing, buddy," Daniel said automatically. "Just a misunderstanding between the girls." Max looked at Lily's face, then at Sophie. "Did she hit you?" he asked Lily directly. "Like she threatened to before?" Sophie's face darkened. "Shut up, Max. You don't know anything." "Sophie," Daniel admonished, but his tone was more surprised than stern. Max moved closer to me, his small body trembling slightly. "She told Lily she would hit her if she ever told about the makeup stealing. I heard her say it last week." Sophie lunged toward Max, her mask of victimhood completely dropped. "You little liar!" Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Sophie, calm down." "He's lying!" Sophie shrieked. "They're all lying about me. You're the only one who ever takes my side." "Dad." Max backed away, bumping into me. I put a protective hand on his shoulder and he leaned against my side. "It's true, Dad," he said, using the name he had adopted for Daniel over the past year. "Sophie is mean to us all the time when you're not looking." Sophie broke free from Daniel's grasp and pointed accusingly at Max. "This is all your fault. You and your stupid sister ruined everything. We were fine until you moved in." Daniel reached for Sophie again, trying to calm her, but she was in full meltdown. In her rage, she knocked a vase off the counter, sending glass shattering across the kitchen floor. "Sophie, that's enough." Daniel's voice finally took on a tone of real authority. Max, frightened by the escalating situation, tried to step back further, but Daniel moved forward at the same moment, reaching for Max's arm to pull him away from the broken glass. His grip was too tight, too sudden. Max, trying to twist away in fear, lost his balance. What happened next seemed to unfold in terrible slow motion. Max fell backwards, his temple connecting with the corner of our heavy marble coffee table. The sound of the impact was sickening. Blood immediately began to flow from a gash above his eye. For one heartbeat, everyone froze. Then I was on my knees beside my son, pressing a kitchen towel to his wound, my heart hammering with panic. "Call an ambulance!" I shouted, but Daniel was already fumbling for his phone. "No, I'll drive. It'll be faster," he said, his face ashen. "Sophie, stay here with Lily." "I'm coming with Max," Lily insisted, already grabbing her shoes. The drive to the emergency room was tense with fear. Max was conscious, but dazed, the towel against his head steadily turning crimson. Daniel kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It was an accident," he said repeatedly, whether to himself or to me I wasn't sure. "I was just trying to keep him away from the glass." At the hospital, the triage nurse took one look at Max and immediately ushered us in. "What happened?" she asked professionally, already examining the wound. "He fell and hit his head on our coffee table," I explained. "He was trying to get away from me," Daniel added, his voice hollow. "I grabbed him too roughly. It was my fault." The nurse's eyes flickered between us, her expression carefully neutral. Was anyone else involved? My stepdaughter was having a tantrum. I said, the event suddenly crystallizing in my mind with perfect clarity. She was threatening my son. My husband grabbed him and he fell. It wasn't quite like that, Daniel interrupted. There was a family disagreement, things got heated. Mr. Foster, the nurse cut in, I need to examine your son now. Perhaps you could both wait outside while the doctor takes a look. In the hallway, Daniel paced anxiously. Why did you tell her it was my fault? I was trying to protect him. The disconnect between what had actually happened and Daniel's perception was staggering. Protect him. From what your daughter was having a violent outburst and instead of controlling her, you grabbed Max. I was trying to get him away from the broken glass. By grabbing him so hard, he fell and split his head open. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his face contorted with stress. You're twisting everything. This was an accident. This whole marriage has been one long accident. I said the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I've been trying so hard to make this work, but I can't do it anymore. Not when my children aren't safe in their own home. The doctor emerged before Daniel could respond. Max is going to need several stitches. The wound is deep but clean. He's also showing mild concussion symptoms, so we'll need to monitor him for a few hours. When we were allowed in to see Max, his small face pale against the hospital pillow, something broke inside me. The sight of my little boy brave and trying not to cry as the doctor prepared to stitch his wound crystallized everything. This had gone too far. Lines had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Can I have a moment alone with my son? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Daniel hesitated, then nodded, stepping out into the hallway. As soon as the door closed, I took Max's hand in mine. I'm so sorry, baby, I whispered, tears filling my eyes. This should never have happened. It's okay, Mom, he said with that heartbreaking resilience children sometimes show. It wasn't Dad's fault. He didn't mean to hurt me. I know, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. But sometimes when people don't mean to hurt us, they still do. And it's my job to make sure you and Lily are safe. After the doctor finished stitching Max's wound, I stepped into the bathroom and made 2 phone calls, one to my sister asking if we could stay with her for a while, and one to a locksmith to change the locks on my car, which was still at the house. I didn't tell Daniel we weren't coming home. I simply gathered our things once Max was cleared to leave, helped him into a wheelchair as hospital policy required, and asked my sister to meet us at the ER entrance. As we waited by the exit, Daniel stepped away to fill out some insurance paperwork. I left him a brief note with the nurse. We need space. Don't try to contact us tonight. When my sister's car pulled up, I helped Max inside, then slid in beside him, holding his hand tightly. As we pulled away from the hospital, I caught a glimpse of Daniel rushing out the automatic doors, confusion giving way to understanding as he watched us drive away. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But some lines can't be uncrossed, and my children's safety would always be my non-negotiable priority. The next week was a blur of pain, fear, and difficult decisions. We stayed at my sister Amy's house where Lily and Max shared the guest room, and I slept on the pull-out couch. Daniel called and texted constantly, at first his messages evolving from confusion to anger to desperate pleas. You can't just take the kids and disappear. This isn't fair. We need to talk about this. Please, Talia, I love you. I love the kids. We can fix this. If you don't respond, I'll have no choice but to involve lawyers. That last message forced me to break my silence. I texted back a single message. We have 2 options, a family meeting with complete honesty about everything that's been happening, or divorce. Your choice. His response came hours later. When and where? I suggested meeting with a family therapist, Dr. Rivera, whom I had previously researched, but we had never seen as a family. She specialized in blended family dynamics and childhood trauma. To my surprise, Daniel agreed without argument. Over the next few days, I focused on helping my children heal both physically and emotionally. Max's wound was healing well, though the bruising around his eye looked worse before it started to improve. More concerning was the emotional trauma both children were processing. Lily began opening up about the extent of Sophie's bullying, revealing incidents I had never known about. Sophie had created fake social media accounts to send Lily anonymous, threatening messages. She had deliberately sabotaged several of Lily's school projects. She had even followed Lily into the girls' bathroom at school to intimidate her when no teachers were around. I was so afraid no one would believe me, Lily confessed one night as I braided her hair before bed, a ritual from her younger years that she had suddenly wanted to resume. Sophie always said you would choose Daniel over us if we complained too much. Her words cut deep. Had I somehow given my children the impression that my marriage was more important than their well-being? Had I been so determined to make our blended family work that I'd ignored obvious warning signs? Max was having nightmares about the accident, waking up crying and calling for me. During the day, he would flinch whenever a door closed too loudly or someone moved too quickly near him. The pediatrician recommended a child psychologist, and I scheduled an immediate appointment. Amy was my rock through it all, taking time off work to help with the kids while I organized our lives. She helped me gather evidence for the family meeting, the nanny cam footage, text messages, photos of injuries, and a timeline of incidents I had documented over the months. "Are you sure you want to try to save this marriage?" she asked one night as we sat at her kitchen table after the kids were asleep. "No one would blame you for walking away after what happened." I stared into my tea, watching the steam rise. "I don't know if the marriage can be saved," I admitted, "but I need Daniel to acknowledge what's been happening. For the kids' sake and for my own. I need the truth to be spoken out loud before I can decide anything." The day before the scheduled family meeting, I spent hours helping Lily prepare what she wanted to say. She was terrified of confronting Sophie and Daniel, but determined to speak her truth. "What if Dad doesn't believe me?" she asked, her voice small. "Then that's information we need to have," I said gently. "But I believe you, Lily. I will always believe you and stand by you." Max was too young to participate in the meeting itself, but he dictated a letter for me to read, describing how Sophie's behavior had made him feel. His childish handwriting was interspersed with misspelled words and tear stains, and reading it broke my heart all over again. In a moment of unexpected clarity, I realized I should reach out to Sophie's mother, Amanda. Though she had struggled with addiction for years, Daniel had mentioned she was now 2 years sober and had occasional visitation with Sophie. Maybe she could provide some context for Sophie's behavior. After some online searching, I found her phone number and called, explaining the situation as neutrally as possible. What Amanda told me was illuminating. Sophie had exhibited similar behaviors in previous schools, resulting in transfers after incidents with classmates. She had been in therapy briefly, but had manipulated the therapist so effectively that she was declared adjusted after just a few sessions. "I tried to tell Daniel," Amanda said, her voice tired. "But Sophie has always known exactly how to play him. He sees what he wants to see when it comes to her." This information was both validating and deeply concerning. If Sophie's behavioral issues were long-standing and Daniel had been in denial for years, what chance did we have of resolving things now? Despite my doubts, I remained determined to face the situation head-on. The night before the meeting, I helped the kids pack overnight bags. They would be staying with my mother while Daniel, Sophie, the therapist, and I had our initial session, to be followed by a full family session if the first one went well. As I tucked them into bed, I made a silent promise. Whatever happened tomorrow, my children would know that their mother had stood up for them. Some truths needed to be spoken, even if they tore apart the life we had tried to build. The family therapist's office was painted a calming sage green with comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Dr. Rivera was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. She greeted each of us warmly as we arrived, establishing a sense of safety and neutrality. I arrived first, tense but resolved. Daniel came next, unshaven and hollow-eyed, clearly having slept as poorly as I had over the past week. When he tried to speak to me privately, Dr. Rivera gently guided us to our seats, reminding us that we would have structured time to communicate. Sophie arrived last, escorted by Daniel's brother, who had picked her up. She entered with a perfect mask of teenage sullenness, though I caught the calculating look she gave the room, assessing the situation before settling into character. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Rivera began. "Before we start, I want to establish some ground rules. Each person will have uninterrupted time to speak. We will listen respectfully without interrupting. When responding, we'll use I statements rather than accusations. Can everyone agree to these guidelines?" We all nodded, though Sophie rolled her eyes slightly. "Talia, since you requested this meeting, would you like to begin?" the therapist asked. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but facing Daniel and Sophie directly made my mouth go dry. I took a deep breath and centered myself, remembering that this wasn't about me or even my marriage. It was about my children's well-being. "For the past 2 years," I began, "I've been trying to create a loving, supportive, blended family. I believed we could overcome the challenges if we all tried hard enough, but I've been ignoring a serious problem, and my children have paid the price for my silence." I described the pattern of Sophie's behavior that I had observed, being careful to focus on specific incidents rather than character judgments. I explained how Lily and Max had gradually become withdrawn and fearful in their own home. I detailed the events leading up to the physical confrontation and Max's injury. Throughout my account, I maintained eye contact with Dr. Rivera, occasionally glancing at Daniel to gauge his reaction. His expression shifted from defensive to confused to pained as I spoke. Sophie, meanwhile, maintained a perfect expression of wounded innocence, occasionally wiping away a non-existent tear. When I finished, I took out my phone. I have evidence to support what I'm saying. Nanny cam footage that shows Sophie's behavior when adults aren't present. Text messages, photos of injuries. I didn't want to resort to surveillance in our home, but I felt I had no choice when my concerns weren't being heard. Dr. Rivera nodded. We'll look at that evidence shortly. Daniel, would you like to respond to what Talia has shared? Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't know what to say. Some of what Talia describes isn't how I remember things at all. Sophie has struggled with the transition, yes, but the level of calculation and cruelty Talia is describing, that's not my daughter. Sophie reached for his hand, squeezing it supportively. And yet, Daniel continued, his voice cracking slightly, I can't deny that something is very wrong in our family. The way Max looked at me in the hospital, the fear in his eyes. I never want my son to look at me that way again. He's not your son, Sophie muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Dr. Rivera turned her attention to Sophie. That's an important statement, Sophie. Can you tell us more about how you feel about your stepmother and step-siblings? Sophie straightened, composing herself. I've tried so hard to fit into this new family, but it's been clear from day one that I'm an outsider. Talia has her perfect little family, and I'm just the inconvenient extra that came with my dad. She's always favored Lily and Max, giving them special treatment, believing them over me. Can you give a specific example of this favoritism? Dr. Rivera asked. Sophie launched into a carefully crafted narrative about being punished more harshly for the same behaviors, being excluded from family decisions, having stricter rules than Lily despite being older. Her performance was masterful, and if I hadn't lived through the reality, I might have been swayed myself. When Sophie finished, Dr. Rivera asked if I wanted to respond. Instead of addressing Sophie's allegations directly, I pulled out my phone. I think it's time we looked at the evidence, I said quietly. Actions speak louder than words. With Dr. Rivera's permission, I connected my phone to the office's secure display system. The footage was difficult to watch. Sophie taunting Lily when she thought no one was looking. Sophie deliberately destroying Max's school project, then rearranging the scene to make it look like an accident. Sophie practicing tears in the bathroom mirror before emerging to claim Lily had pushed her. Most damning was the audio of Sophie explicitly threatening both children. No one will ever believe you over me. My dad will always take my side. If you tell, I'll make things so much worse for you. Daniel's face drained of color as he watched. This can't be real, he whispered. It is, I said softly. And there's more. Lily asked to speak directly to you, Daniel. She's waiting in the next room with Dr. Rivera's assistant. She wants to tell you herself what she's experienced. Daniel nodded numbly, and Dr. Rivera went to bring Lily in. My daughter entered, looking small but determined. She had written out what she wanted to say, and her hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. Dad, she began, using the name she had adopted for Daniel shortly after our wedding. I wanted to love you and be a family so badly. I was so happy when you married Mom. I thought I was getting a dad and a sister. Her voice grew stronger as she continued detailing the systematic emotional abuse she had endured. How Sophie would seem sweet when adults were present but would pinch her under the table. How Sophie had spread rumors at school that Lily was self-harming for attention. How Sophie had deleted Lily's school assignments from the shared computer, causing her to fail 2 important projects. The worst part wasn't the mean things, Lily said, her voice breaking slightly. It was that when I tried to tell you, you never believed me. You always thought I was making it up or exaggerating. It made me feel like I didn't matter to you at all. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Lily, I never meant... Please let her finish, Dr. Rivera said gently. Lily took a deep breath. When Sophie hit me last week, it wasn't the first time. She slapped me before, pinched me hard enough to bruise, pulled my hair in the upstairs bathroom where there's no camera. She told me if I ever told anyone, she would convince you to send me and Max away to live with strangers. Sophie suddenly stood up. This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on me. Dad, are you really going to believe these lies? but something had shifted in Daniel's expression as he looked at his daughter. "Sit down, Sophie," he said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "You're taking their side." Sophie's voice rose in disbelief. "I'm asking you to sit down and listen. Lily deserves that much respect." Sophie's face contorted with rage, her carefully maintained mask slipping completely. "I hate you," she screamed at Lily. "I hate all of you. You stole my dad from me. Everything was perfect before you came along." Dr. Rivera stood up. "Sophie, I understand you're feeling attacked right now, but this reaction is concerning. Can you take a deep breath and try to respond more calmly?" "Screw this," Sophie spat. "I don't have to sit here and listen to these lies." She grabbed her backpack and stormed toward the door. Daniel stood torn between following his daughter and staying to hear the rest of what Lily had to say. The indecision on his face spoke volumes. "Let her go," Dr. Rivera said calmly. "My assistant will make sure she stays in the waiting area. This might be a good moment for us to take a short break." As Sophie slammed the door behind her, the room fell silent. Lily was trembling, and I moved to sit beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "You did so well," I whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Daniel sat heavily in his chair, looking shell-shocked. "I don't understand," he said finally. "How could I not have seen this?" Dr. Rivera offered him a gentle smile. "It's not uncommon for parents to have blind spots when it comes to their children's behavior, especially in blended family situations. What matters now is how you respond to this new information." After our break, we reconvened without Sophie, who had refused to return to the session. Dr. Rivera suggested showing Daniel the documentation of Max's injury and letting him hear the letter Max had written. As Daniel looked at the photos of Max's stitched wound and the bruising that had spread across his small face, something seemed to break inside him. When I read Max's letter aloud describing how scared he felt around Sophie, and how sad he was that Dad didn't believe us, tears streamed down Daniel's face. "I've failed all of you," he said finally. "I was so afraid of losing Sophie that I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. I didn't protect Lily and Max. I didn't support you, Talia. And worst of all, I didn't really help Sophie either. By enabling her behavior, I've let her become someone I don't recognize." It was the acknowledgement I had been waiting for, the first step toward any possible healing. But where did we go from here, Doctor? Rivera helped us formulate an immediate plan. Sophie would temporarily stay with her mother, who had agreed to take her for an extended period. Daniel would move in with his brother while we all engaged in intensive therapy, both individually and as various family units. Most importantly, Lily and Max would not be forced to interact with Sophie until they felt safe doing so, and even then only with professional supervision. As the session ended, Daniel asked if he could speak with me alone for a moment. Dr. Rivera gave us the room, taking Lily with her to get a glass of water. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Daniel said, his voice raw. "But I want you to know I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this right for the kids, for all the kids including Sophie. She needs help that I haven't been able to give her." I nodded, too emotionally drained for more words. The future of our marriage hung in a precarious balance, but at least the truth had finally been spoken. Sometimes that's the only place healing can begin. In the months that followed our family meeting, we all embarked on difficult but necessary journeys of healing. The road was neither straight nor easy, but with professional help and genuine commitment to change, we slowly began to rebuild what had been broken. The first weeks were the hardest. After the family meeting, Sophie had a complete meltdown, alternating between rage and manipulative tears, as she realized her father was no longer automatically taking her side. When Daniel insisted she needed to take responsibility for her actions and begin therapy, she ran away to a friend's house. The police became involved, and it was a traumatic 24 hours before she was safely located. With her manipulative tactics no longer working on her father, Sophie reluctantly agreed to live with her mother and attend intensive therapy. The psychologist diagnosed her with several concerning behavioral issues that had gone unaddressed for years. Amanda, now stable in her sobriety, proved to be a more consistent parent than anyone had expected, establishing clear boundaries that Sophie had never experienced before. Daniel moved into his brother's guest house and began both individual therapy and parenting classes specialized for blended families. He also started attending a support group for parents of troubled teens, where he found comfort in knowing he wasn't alone in his struggles. Meanwhile, Lily, Max, and I returned home, reclaiming our space as a sanctuary rather than a battleground. Both children continued therapy, processing their trauma and rebuilding their sense of safety. Max's physical wound healed faster than his emotional ones. He continued to have nightmares and would become anxious whenever voices were raised. But gradually, with consistent therapy and the knowledge that he was believed and protected, his natural resilience began to reassert itself. Lily flourished once the constant threat of Sophie's presence was removed. She reconnected with old friends, her grades improved, and she started painting again. Her therapist helped her understand that Daniel's failure to believe her wasn't her fault, and that speaking her truth, however belatedly heard, was an act of courage. Daniel and I began marriage counseling, facing the hard truths about how we had both contributed to the family breakdown. My resentment toward him for his blindness to Sophie's behavior was matched by his shame at having failed to protect all the children in his care. Some sessions ended in tears, others in cautious hope. We were building something new from the ashes of our previous relationship, something more honest, if less idealistic. 3 months after the family meeting, Daniel asked if he could start having supervised visits with Lily and Max. I was apprehensive, but respected my children's right to have a relationship with the man who had been their stepfather for 3 years. To my surprise, both children wanted to see him. Their first meeting was facilitated by their therapist. Daniel apologized directly to both children, taking full responsibility for not believing them and for the incident that had injured Max. He didn't make excuses or ask for forgiveness, simply acknowledged the harm that had been done and promised to do better in the future. "I miss you guys," he told them, his voice thick with emotion. "But I understand if you need more time." Max, with the straightforward resilience of children, was the first to offer a hug. Lily was more reserved but agreed to regular supervised visits. 6 months after the family crisis, we had established a new normal. Daniel had moved into an apartment nearby and had regular visitation with Lily and Max. Sophie remained with her mother but had begun carefully supervised visits with her father. Her therapy was showing promising results, though the road ahead for her would be long and challenging. Daniel and I decided to try living together again, with the understanding that our children's well-being would always be the priority. Sophie would not return to our home until all the therapists involved agreed it was safe and appropriate, and even then there would be strict boundaries and constant vigilance. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the porch swing after the children were in bed, he took my hand. "I've been thinking about what went wrong," he said quietly. "I was so afraid of being a failed father to Sophie that I couldn't see the damage she was causing. I thought love meant always taking her side, never setting hard boundaries. I was completely wrong." I squeezed his hand. "We both made mistakes. I should have been more forceful about what I was seeing instead of trying to keep the peace at all costs. The thing is," Daniel continued, "I'm not sure Sophie and Lily will ever have a real sisterly relationship. Too much has happened." "Probably not," I agreed. "And that's okay. Not all blended families become one big happy unit. Sometimes the best we can do is establish respect and safety. Love might come later, or it might not." That hard-won wisdom became our new foundation. We stopped trying to force relationships that weren't ready to form naturally. We celebrated small victories, a civil conversation between Sophie and Lily during a supervised visit, Max laughing freely in Daniel's presence without any signs of anxiety, Sophie accepting a consequence without manipulation or rage. A year after the crisis, our family looked very different than I had initially imagined. Sophie lived primarily with her mother, but spent one weekend a month with us under conditions carefully established by our team of therapists. She was making progress, though there were still setbacks and difficult days. Lily and Sophie maintained a polite distance, never becoming friends, but learning to coexist respectfully during Sophie's visits. Max, with his generous heart, had cautiously welcomed Sophie back into his life after she made a sincere apology and demonstrated consistent change over many months. Daniel had become a more present, more aware father to all 3 children. He no longer enabled Sophie's manipulative behavior, but he also didn't abandon her in her struggle. He had learned the difficult balance between unconditional love and necessary accountability. As for me, I had found my voice as a mother and stepmother. I no longer questioned my instincts or silenced my concerns in the name of family harmony. I had learned that real family bonds are built on truth and mutual respect, not on the appearance of perfection. The most important lesson I learned through this painful journey was that protecting your children isn't just a parental right, it's a non-negotiable duty. Some lines can't be crossed, some boundaries must be absolute. When someone hurts your child, whether physically or emotionally, standing firm isn't being divisive, it's being a parent. Blended families come with unique challenges that fairy tales don't prepare us for. The happy ending isn't always what we initially pictured. Sometimes it's messy or more complicated, built on hard truths rather than comfortable illusions. But in that messy reality, there's an authenticity that can be more meaningful than the perfect family portrait I once tried so desperately to create. If you're navigating the complicated waters of a blended family, remember that love isn't about perfect harmony. It's about honest communication, appropriate boundaries, and the courage to speak uncomfortable truths. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to draw hard lines when it comes to protecting your children. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds.